I haven't had a man in 2 years, the neighbor confessed by the fence. Sarah's hands trembled as she set down her coffee mug on the porch railing. I haven't had a man in 2 years, her neighbor confessed by the fence, voice barely above a whisper. The request that followed would change both their lives forever. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys that explore the complicated terrain of human connection. The morning had begun like any other in Meadowbrook Lane. Sarah Matthews, 34 and recently divorced, had moved to the quiet suburban neighborhood 6 months ago seeking peace after the storm of her failed marriage. The small blue house with white trim had become her sanctuary, a place to rebuild the pieces of her shattered confidence. Her neighbor, Eleanor Wilson, was a mystery. In her early 40s with copper hair that caught the sunlight, Eleanor kept to herself, offering polite waves but little conversation. Until today. Sarah had been pruning her rosebushes when she noticed Eleanor standing by the wooden fence that separated their properties, watching her with an intensity that made Sarah straighten up. "Good morning," Sarah called, wiping soil from her gardening gloves. Eleanor's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Morning. Those roses are coming along beautifully." "Thank you. It's my first attempt at gardening. Turns out I needed something that required patience after the divorce." Eleanor nodded, her fingers tracing the weathered grain of the fence. "Patience. Yes. That's something I've had too much of lately." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I haven't had a man in 2 years, she finally said, the words tumbling out. "Would you help me with that?" Sarah blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "I'm sorry." "Not like that," Eleanor laughed nervously. "I meant, would you help me remember how to date again? How to talk to men? I see you going out sometimes, looking confident. I've forgotten how to do that." Relief and something like compassion flooded through Sarah. "Of course. Though I'm hardly an expert. Why don't you come over for coffee?" That conversation by the fence marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship between two women healing from different wounds. Eleanor, Sarah learned over steaming mugs of coffee on her back porch, had lost her husband to cancer 2 years ago. After nursing him through his final months, she'd retreated into herself, letting her career as an interior designer consume her days while loneliness filled her nights. "I thought I was doing fine," Eleanor confessed, cradling her mug. "Work kept me busy. I have my book club. My sister calls every Sunday. But last week, I found myself talking to my refrigerator." She laughed, but the sound held no humor. "That's when I knew I needed to rejoin the living." Sarah understood isolation all too well. Her ex-husband had slowly eroded her social circle during their marriage, his jealousy creating walls between her and friends. After the divorce, she discovered how empty her life had become. "We're quite the pair," Sarah said. "I'm trying to learn who I am without someone defining me, and you're trying to remember who you were before loss changed you." Eleanor's eyes brightened with unshed tears. "Exactly. So, will you help me? I don't even know where to start." Sarah hesitated. Her own dating experiences post-divorce had been a series of awkward coffee meetings and disappointing dinner conversations. But looking at Eleanor's hopeful expression, she couldn't refuse. "We'll figure it out together," she promised. Their project began simply enough. Sarah helped Eleanor create a dating profile, the two of them laughing over wine as they debated which photos captured Eleanor's warm smile best. They shopped for new clothes, Eleanor rediscovering her love for colors after years of muted tones. Sarah taught Eleanor the unwritten rules of modern dating that had evolved during her marriage. But beneath the surface, complications brewed. Sarah's neighbor across the street, Michael Donovan, a landscape architect who had recently moved to the neighborhood, caught Eleanor's attention during a block party. Tall with kind eyes and a quiet confidence, Michael seemed genuinely interested in Eleanor's stories about her design work. Sarah felt an unexpected pang watching them talk, their conversation flowing easily. She told herself it was concern for her new friend, nothing more. After all, Eleanor wasn't ready for anything serious. Was she? As weeks passed, Sarah found herself increasingly distracted by thoughts of Michael. She noticed his morning routine, coffee on his porch at 7, newspaper in hand. She timed her jogs to coincide with his gardening. Yet whenever they spoke, she steered the conversation toward Eleanor, mentioning her friend's interests, creating opportunities for them to connect. Eleanor blossomed under Michael's attention. Color returned to her cheeks. She laughed more freely. She began taking on new design clients, her creativity flowing again. Sarah should have been happy for her friend. Instead, a complicated knot of emotions tightened in her chest. "He asked me to dinner," Eleanor announced one evening, her voice breathless with excitement. "A real date. Not coffee, not lunch. Dinner." Sarah forced a smile. "That's wonderful. Where is he taking you?" As Eleanor described Michael's plans, the riverside restaurant she'd mentioned wanting to try, Sarah realized with startling clarity that she had developed feelings for Michael herself. Feelings she had no right to acknowledge, not when her friend was finally finding happiness again. The night of Eleanor's date, Sarah paced her living room, checking her phone repeatedly though she knew Eleanor wouldn't text during dinner. When headlights swept across her window near midnight, Sarah peered through the curtains to see Michael walking Eleanor to her door. Their silhouettes merged briefly, a goodnight kiss, before Eleanor disappeared inside. Sarah stepped away from the window, heart heavy. She was being ridiculous. Childish. She should be celebrating Eleanor's success, not nursing a schoolgirl crush on a man who clearly preferred her friend. The next morning, Sarah avoided her usual gardening, not wanting to risk seeing either Eleanor or Michael. But around noon, a knock at her door forced her to face what she'd been avoiding. Eleanor stood on her porch, eyes bright but troubled. "Can we talk?" They settled in Sarah's kitchen, the space that had become their confessional over the past months. The date was perfect, Eleanor began. Michael was attentive, interesting. He asked all the right questions. He listened to my answers. She twisted her hands in her lap. And I felt nothing. Sarah blinked. Nothing? Not a spark. Not a flutter. Nothing. Eleanor's laugh was self-deprecating. I kept thinking about James, my husband, how different this felt. How wrong, somehow. Relief and guilt warred in Sarah's chest. Maybe you're not ready. That's what I thought at first. But then, walking home, I realized something. Eleanor met Sarah's gaze directly. "I don't want Michael. But I think you do." Heat rushed to Sarah's face. That's not. It's okay, Eleanor reached across the table, squeezing Sarah's hand. "I've seen how you look at him. How you light up when he's around. You've been pushing us together because you think that's what I need, but Sarah, what do you need?" The question hung between them, demanding honesty Sarah wasn't sure she could give. "I need to be a good friend," she finally said. "I need to not betray your trust." Eleanor shook her head. "You've been the best friend I could have asked for. You helped me remember that I'm still alive, that I can still connect with people. But that connection doesn't have to be romantic. Not yet." She smiled gently. "James would want me to be happy, but rushing into dating isn't making me happy. Rediscovering myself is. My work. My friendships. You." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. "I didn't mean to develop feelings for Michael. It just happened." "Of course it did. He's kind and thoughtful and looks at you the same way you look at him when you think no one notices." Sarah's heart stuttered. "He does? He asked about you last night." "Several times." Eleanor's smile turned mischievous. "I may have mentioned you're free this Saturday." The weeks that followed brought changes to Meadowbrook Lane. Eleanor threw herself into a major design project, transforming a historic downtown building into a community arts center. Her confidence grew daily, not from external validation but from reconnecting with her passion. Sarah and Michael began dating cautiously, both aware of the delicate balance they were maintaining. Their first kiss happened in Sarah's garden, surrounded by the roses she'd nurtured from struggling stems to vibrant blooms. And the fence between Sarah and Eleanor's yards? They decided to replace it with a shared garden path, connecting their spaces while respecting their separate journeys. 6 months later, the three of them sat on Sarah's porch, watching fireflies dance in the summer twilight. Eleanor had brought a man from her pottery class, not a date, she insisted, just a friend who appreciated good wine and better company. "I never thought that conversation by the fence would lead us here," Eleanor mused, raising her glass in a toast. "To asking for help when we need it. To helping each other heal," Sarah added. Michael smiled, his hand finding Sarah's. "To fences that become pathways." As the evening deepened into night, Sarah reflected on how seeking connection, even when it feels impossible, even when it seems too late, can transform lives in unexpected ways. Eleanor had asked for help finding a man, but what she'd really needed was to find herself again. And Sarah, in helping her neighbor, had discovered that her own heart still had the capacity for love she thought her divorce had destroyed. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit what we need. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is help others find their way, even if the path looks different than we imagined. And sometimes, the most important connections happen not across dating apps or dinner tables, but across fences between neighbors who have the courage to be vulnerable. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more tales of human connection, healing, and the courage it takes to begin again. Remember that your story isn't over. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after the hardest ones.